So first of all, thanks a lot, Simon, for being here in this conversation with me. I'm very happy to have a conversation with you again. We had a time that we have worked together in London, and now we are both on the different parts of the world. You are in Australia, I'm in Brazil, and London is the middle of that.
That's right.
But let's start with that. Thanks a lot for being here. It's a pleasure to talk to you again. And welcome. You are talking not only to the Brazilian guys over here. This is published on Ed Latin. This is for Spanish-speaking Latin, and hopefully it can be shared with different people from around the globe as well through Strategist Revival, my podcast that I love. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
And first of all, let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit of your career. You are a CSO and Chief of Experience as well. Right now, you were on RGA as well when we were together in London. But if you can, please tell a little bit about your career.
Um, I've always been an agency strategist, but I didn't know what it was when I became that. I was a statistician at university, and I was doing statistics and back in the old days when you had to program those models by with code line by line, and you had to, do regression analysis and maximum likelihood and all these things that I still count on my fingers, but I was good at statistics. And I had a call from a company called BBDO saying, "Can you come here and help us with some data analysis?" And I said, "I don't know who that is, and I have no idea what that means, but I needed it's a nice summer job, so I did it. And next thing you know, I was writing FE's papers for BBDO in Australia, and we won. We won a couple of awards for some work there, and they said, "Oh, you know how to do the FEs and data and stuff. You should just stay." And that was the beginning of my career as a strategist. And I still probably didn't really know what was BBDO and what was advertising and what I was doing there for about another year or so until I really started to understand the role of strategy and in communications, in marketing, and sort of integrated campaigns and platforms and things like that. And I started to like it, and I liked that I didn't have to wear a suit. All my friends from university, all went into consulting and banking and stuff, and they were all looking kind of miserable and wearing suits. And they don't look miserable anymore. They just like they all, made a lot more money than me, but I was having more fun than they were. And so I stayed in it, and I was lucky at that time. There was a lot of really great UK strategists that moved to Australia in that around that period that, obviously wanted to escape the cold and the rain in London, and they all came to Australia. And so we had amazing strategists like Ollie Taylor and Mike Daniels and Leif Strom, who were like the first wave of bringing that sort of the that almost like school of strategy that was happening in London. They were bringing that to Australia, and I got really lucky. I worked for them, and so I learned how to do this. Um, and I always thought it was fascinating because I went, here I am in the sort of intersection of I guess analysis and business, but also kind of psychology and culture. Um, and it was a really exciting job. And so I kept doing it. And then I went to London. Those guys all told me you have to go to London and learn this thing, even, get better. So I did. I ended up at Abbott Mead Vickers, which, was amazing, working for Bridget, Angier, and Craig Maudsley. And and it was sort of in London, you started to see how broad and how expansive this thing really is, because then you started to see that there was companies like that, really OG big brand platform creative agencies. And then there were really interesting companies coming up that were doing more sort of consumer experience and more design-led strategy and design thinking. And I got really interested in that, and I ended up at AKQA, working on Nike and Xbox and Heineken, but not on their comms side of things. It was actually more on the experience side of things, which was fascinating. I had no idea what I was doing. I used to run home after a day of work and Google all the things that everyone had said in that meeting because I was like, I have no idea what anyone's talking about. What's mobile first experience? What is, what's experience design? What is, uh, thinking about, APIs and platforms and how to kind of, plug into these pieces of technology that existed. So making things like, Nike Training Club or doing things with the old Xbox Connect were fascinating, um, challenges that I'd never sort of seen in a communications kind of creative agency before. And so that changed my perspective a lot on what this is, what this business, what this discipline of strategy could be to business. Because from there I went to places like Sydney and Amsterdam, which was actually partly owned by Cirque du Soleil. So it had a very like live brand entertainment angle to its work. And we were doing installations and we were doing retail fit outs and we were doing, experiences that happened, you literally were physically in it. So how does the brand manifest as a physical space? The likes of Absolute Vodka or Adidas Originals. I went to RGA London to work on, things like Beats by Dre and Samsung and you know, creating sort of digital banks, for millennials and for Gen Z audiences who never seen cash. Like it's a very, these sorts of it drove me to always go, I guess, to the opposite of where I was before. If I was in sort of brand platform world, I wanted to go into digital experience. If I was in digital experience, I wanted to go to, physical spaces. If I was in physical spaces, I wanted to go back to kind of more narrative things. And that's kind of how I've always done it. And after London, I ended up at Chiat Day in Los Angeles, which I guess is probably one of the most famous in terms of, storytelling. If you think about Apple and Gatorade and these sorts of legacies, it was all kind of there, and that was sort of again an amazing experience. Um, but my view is, and my philosophy is, it's never one or the other. Everything needs to be together. I think strategists have an amazing opportunity, an amazing uh responsibility though, to be bringing all those worlds together. And that's how I do it. That's my view. And that's what I always say to people coming up or any advice they go, should I go there? Should I go there? I go to the one that isn't what you're doing right now. Go towards the thing that seems the sort of scariest or the weirdest, because you'll find a way to then connect that piece to the other pieces you have, and you become a much more valuable strategist. But for me, that's been my career. That's been how I've done it. I'm now back in Australia after so many years. My wife had enough of moving kids and prams and cars and toys and everything three, five, four times, bank accounts, all that stuff. That's enough. We're back in Australia and back actually with BBDO, back where I started. So it's kind of been one big circle, and it's been good.
It sounds amazing. And the experience you had on different cultures as well, right? Going to London and then California, Amsterdam, as you've mentioned.
Mm.
So you have experience in different cultures, which is, from my perspective as well, very interesting because we are using and understanding and studying the target audience, of course, for each brief that we receive and want to build a
Yeah.
brief. But also in a different culture, you are not using the same, let's say, the premises that you had on that perspective, the perspective of that audience, because you need to learn more and do the things connect to that culture. And the culture is not only about moving the countries or the cities. The culture is around different things as well. So how do you see that the grabbing the insight on the culture of the audience?
Mm.
How do we
Mm.
that, and how should they do? What would be your advices? And this very different for working with the brands that you've mentioned, for example, the Nike or the Apple
Mm.
from different places around the globe?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I I think there are some things that sort of are common, like some things that stay the same in terms of like, big macro things, that everyone in the world sort of is experiencing. And then there's levels that are, very unique to certain markets. I always found it fascinating how, in some ways, very different the UK was to Australia, even though we're in the Commonwealth and I don't know, you sort of think you assume the UK will be sort of like us, but it's not. And then in some ways, the US experience was sort of closer to the Australian kind of framing of certain issues. Maybe maybe because I was in California, but yeah, the short answer on this, Rafa, for me is get I very deliberately get people around me who are much like who have the um, want to go deep in culture. I think it's a discipline in itself. Like I find the levels of research and depth that you can go to amazing. It's absolutely fascinating. But I know as a CSO, I don't always have that time to go so deep. So what I do is I like to bring people around that conversation that I say, give me that perspective. We're talking about football for Nike football. There are levels to that football conversation, which is super deep, even down to like what neighborhood you were in when you had that observation, or the way there's behavior in the locker room in certain parts of London that are different to others. You got to go there, but you've also got to let people who live in that world come to you with that insight or with that perspective, and you got to listen. I've done briefs, I've worked on brands that I'm not that person, whether it's like high performance cars or um, certain, fashion, alcohol, whatever it is, there's certain things that I'm like, I'm not me, I'm not that person. But that doesn't mean you go, well, I just put my assumption on it and that's that, or you go, well, I know it's sort of at a high level and that's kind of that. I go, no, how can you bring people into that are, from those worlds, from, having those conversations, maybe have never even set foot in an agency. And actually, when you bring those diverse perspectives together, the work gets better. The work gets more interesting. You get more, depth to it. It becomes more, like has more grit. So, for example, one of the projects when I worked on Hyundai in the UK was the launch of a high performance vehicle um, called the N. And I'm not a high performance guy. I've never driven a sort of, high performance car. But what I asked, I had an ethnographer, um, an amazing woman called Paula Zaccotti, who wrote a book. Actually, I think I have a copy of it up here. It's called Everything We Touch. And she looks at every single thing you did in a day, all the things you touched, and then she puts it onto a flat lay, and you see the world of that person. And she did that experiment for high performance car drivers, and you sort of think they're all going to be Lewis Hamilton, but they touch all the things that we like. They've got to go buy milk and they've got to pick up their kids from school, and it's a quite fascinating um duality of that world that they want to be in, but the real world you have to live in. And so we were able to make a really interesting campaign about how that car gives you a moment of mischief in your day. And these are the things that only come from having that diverse perspective. The people who are living in those cultures, or can have a actually a sometimes just open another little door into it or a window into it that you couldn't get yourself as the agency strategist. Um, when I was quite young at the beginning of my career, I worked on a campaign for youth speeding, I couldn't get near that audience. They thought I was an undercover cop. You cannot come out of your agents of your office in downtown, wherever, Soho in London or in Sydney, come from the city and go to some like go out in the country or go to really remote parts and just fit right in. It doesn't, you got to respect a little bit where you're going and who these people are. And so sometimes I go, well, what if they come on that journey with me? What if they came into the project? What if they came into the agency? Who do we know out there? Who can we talk to? Who's better at it than us? And we bring them in. And that's means it's not necessarily, a creative person or whatever. That could be someone who lives in that community or has grown up um in it or has uh has been working in it for longer than you. And these are the things that you always, as a strategist, you try and pull together as much as you can.
And those people, would you call them to, as a freelancer, or to have an interview, a qualitative interview with them for that? Or how would you manage to do that? Or, and I'm also thinking about the diversity on the team to not have
Yeah.
really, let's put it clear, because the majority of people in the agencies, they are, well, they used to be, at least they are getting better, but that are
Mm.
sexual and at least here in Brazil, white and
Yeah.
eventually more Catholic. Anyway, it's trying to
Yeah.
go out of the stereotypes. But the diversity, not only on that, but asking the question first was, how do you grab those people? Is interviewing them and as a research, or bringing them as a freelance moment to work with you on this?
Anything you can get. Anything. Again, I sort of go, we are, you think about our business, it's about people, it's about a combination of your sort of observation and experience and who the psychology and the kind of cultural, conversation. So it's people, right? So if it's like, if you know someone, it's like, oh, it's a friend, just call them up and see. If it's a freelancer, cool, get them. If it's like, oh, my sister just took, just is a photographer and she did this sort of exhibition and she knows that person, it's like, get them, like I kind of go, we I know the old saying, it's a bit of a cliche about strategy, about get away from the desk, get out from behind the computer. But I also go pick up the phone, call people. Like the number of things that we did, even at a place like an RGA in London, which was very like big accounts, big brand. It was well known, but the number of things we pulled as like favors or you know we just someone or someone lives in that neighborhood, like you for things like Nike, for Beats, whatever, it was, you still have to go there. It's not because it's such a big brand you just have those people working on it and they know everything. No, you have to keep pushing that. And I go, uh yeah, pick up the phone. Someone will help you. Like there's people will do favors if it's kind of interesting and if you believe that you're onto something. I've found in my career, luckily, when you pick up the phone, people tend to go, yeah, like that's cool. I'll help you, or I'll connect you with that person. Especially in worlds like, fashion and, streetwear, sneakers, these are worlds that you can't just like show up one day and go, excuse me, what's your insight about this? Like it doesn't, you know what I mean? It's not, but also, do you remember like, when people do work like for employee engagement, like for stakeholder work or you're talking to people inside an organization, that's a culture as well, right? So it's not just I have my 10 questions and you answer them. You got to go there and you've got to sit in that in the cafeteria and you got to talk to people and you got to like just let them talk and you've got to you know um like again bring people in to that conversation that they might break a little bit what you thought. I think the hardest thing sometimes for strategy people and agency people is we're pretty good at having an instinct about what an answer might be. But because we're good at having that instinct, it's harder for us to bring people in that might break it because it's like, oh man, but I thought that was really good. And someone goes, that's the dumbest thing. It's never going to work. Now you're going to hate that. And you're like, really? I thought we were onto something, and that's a hard thing. And I think that's why sometimes we resist maybe bringing a lot of people like different perspectives in. We're worried about how it might maybe break our own one. Um, but that's sort of where the growth is. That's where the really interesting stuff is when somebody pops up and says that's a bunch of bullshit, and you go, okay, like let's go again. When I lived in Los Angeles. Before COVID, it was, you know, the I think, the Black Lives Matter movement was really important there. And recognizing a little bit that yes, we all want diversity and yes, it's a good thing and but then recognizing and realizing that people's lived experience, like I'm the only one of the you people in this whole room, is oh shit, like it's a different level then of the conversation. You know, it's seeing those things, having those experiences, I think you've got to be prepared to just let your thing go, let your presumptions go, let your belief about the situation go, whether that's a brand issue or a cultural issue or a whole societal issue. You've got to be ready to let it go and rebuild it based on what other people are telling you about that issue that you didn't have that perspective before. And I think that willingness and that ability to let go, I think in strategy, sometimes we think, oh, it's embarrassing. Oh, I failed, or they didn't buy the strategy. It's like, no, 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 that's courageous and good to go, well, it's not right. We'll go again. Don't see that as like a failure. See that as that's the process.
Then on that perspective, would I be looking for the data that you have started your career with? And then I am working on that as well now. I'm a creative effects director at the M9 DDB, so a new role for me
Yeah.
because I used to just give briefs and ask questions and of the making the analysis to grab the insights. So on that
Mm,
perspective, the planners, the strategists are looking for the data and those points to grab the insights, but in parallel, doing these conversations that you've mentioned or
mm.
previously. What would you say in terms of the time, of doing that? I know it depends on each of the briefs you work differently. But I was thinking if I receive a brief from the client, then I'm going to look for the information from the audience and of course the competitors and grabbing the insights on those
Mhm.
perspectives. And then when I grab the key message and the key insight for that, I would be calling eventually these people that you've mentioned that can have a new point of view on that idea, on that thing, things like that. Does it make sense? Would it be something like that or different?
In terms of then building your effectiveness case,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really interesting. So, you know, again, like even like I always find it fascinating. You go like effectiveness was there was a way to do it, like there was certain data points you needed to prove that case. But that was also based on the fact that there was a certain kind of work. They were all kind of the same things. Here was our campaign, here was our film and our out of home and our digital thing, whatever it is, and it got this many brand awareness was this, and the sales went like this, and the market share went like that, and tick tick tick. And I look around now and I go, there are even the nature of the work and what it's trying to do is very different. If you compare a classic, FMCG, maybe case study to, seeing now, I don't know, like for example, um, something that's more like lives in culture, or it's a new product or a service or something that is designed to work in this, not necessarily on broadcast, or something that is about a social issue. The analysis of that is also needs to change. The people who judge it should also be changing. I say to, my colleagues and people coming up, I'm like, you shouldn't, I shouldn't be on those juries anymore. I did that. Like I'm, you want to give that spot to somebody else who's going to come with the perspective and go, um, that's cool, but did it do anything for this community? It was meant to be, actually it sort of draws inspiration from a certain world, but then it doesn't actually help that audience buy that product, or, it, it, it's sort of a bit biased in how it's been constructed in terms of, who it's for, and or would a designer see it the same way as maybe like a kind of brand strategist? And like I'm talking about diversity, not just in sort of background or like cultural diversity, but also like diversity in skill and in professional perspective. Like I like it when a jury has, if we're judging creative awards or effectiveness awards, does it have people who are like not even from, like, have never worked in an agency, who, like, who would look at the data a bit more, um I don't know, maybe like uh impartially, or they don't know who DM9 is, it doesn't influence their minds. Like I think those are good things too, when we sort of expose a bit ourselves to the real world, and have that sort of thing. We were experimenting a little bit here in Australia with like um People's Choice, for the Effies. Like there's the Effies that, everyone goes, yes, they did, it's Ehrenberg Bass and has mental availability and the 60/40 and la la la, and they nailed that. But then it's like, do we even like that campaign? Like, did we like it? Or you know, somebody going, yeah, it's a great case study, but man, no one even likes that work. No one's talking about that work. No one cares. It's a nice effectiveness case, but should we have maybe the audience have a perspective on that? And again, even that, like, it gives you perspective. It gives you something that says, oh yeah, let's not forget that. So I think that the short answer to your question is, even yeah, yes, is, that the point of view about having diverse people at the table applies when you are constructing a case, when you are thinking about even what is the case, going to prove, when you are thinking about how did we do the work, to make this effect. Who is then judging it? Who is it for? I think the more diverse perspectives we have at the table throughout that whole process, the better. I've not seen any data, speaking of data, to suggest the opposite. Never. Not once. No one can prove to me it's better to just have the same guys judging the same thing over and over. Not never. Like it gets better. The work, think about the things we now surface, global shows where you see work from amazing, interesting brands in different markets you never heard of it before, and you're like, wow, now we learned something we can apply here in our market, because it was a really cool case. It got an exposure that back in the old days it didn't used to get. Um, I think even a few years ago, the account planning group in the UK, who are amazing, and I used to be on the committee with them too. They opened the awards, the Creative Strategy Awards, to global entries. And before that, it was only London, it was only the UK, and it was amazing. But like it was the same, sort of few agencies and who were amazing at that work. When they opened it to global entries, we got amazing things came from all over the world. And Brazil is a great example of that. That was when a lot of us, it was the first time we saw Brazilian strategy and creativity. It was amazing. Like you were sitting in the agency back in London going, man, this stuff is sick. This is unbelievable because they opened up that entry. And so now as planners, you started to copy, you know, what are the guys in Brazil doing as, creatives, they wanted to make work like what Brazil was doing because it had a different humor or it was just like crazy different sort of concepts coming out of there. So, when you open that up, you get, everyone benefits from that.
Very proud to listen on that. Activity
Yeah.
to Brazil. I know I'm thinking on terms of awards and the things around that. You won the Grand Effie, right?
Yes.
Which advice would you give for the strategists from all over the world, but especially the ones from Brazil, but not only the
Oh,
strategists, for all of us? Which advice would you give in terms of winning an Effie awards? How to go there?
um, it's a really good question. I never actually talk about that for a second. I won, for those that don't know, I won the Grand Effie for a road safety case study. And at the time, it was harder to prove, you know, that kind of story is harder to prove than a more classic, here is our, product, here is our media investment, and here is then the sales or the market share, whatever. You're talking about saving lives. So it's a very different, you know, way to even construct a case. And I think the bit of advice I would say to everyone is don't worry about is it going to win gold or silver or Grand Effie, whatever. Worry about what is the story you believe you can tell, and then work backwards from that. I didn't ever I got it kind of very clear in my mind about what I believed we had achieved there. And then I set about writing that as opposed to going, how do I win like, what are the judges gonna like? And oh, this thing won last year, so now this year it's going to be all about this. I don't like all that stuff. And like, oh, no one enters that category. Let's enter that one because we have a better chance of getting it. That stuff I go, okay, but then it's like just you're just playing a game. But actually going, what do we believe happened here? And now let's work backwards from that. And along the way, then that journey, you may find, oh, we should enter it in this category as well, or we will find more budget to do it three times because it opened up sort of other conversation about what we proved here. That's fine, but don't go into it like, how do I win one? Go into it with what do we believe? And then that is the story you want to tell. The other little bits to that I would add is um be in it for the long haul. Like it's kind of strange now. Like I think when back then the Effies were actually were every second year or third year. It wasn't every year. So you had longer to to construct a case or to think about that data over time. I think now because the Effies is every year, everyone is sort of racing a little bit to go that campaign, quick, get it out, and then we've got 3 months of data, and boom, it's an FE paper. Okay, like cool, but I think take the long view and also think how can I okay, it doesn't have to go this year. We can do it next year and we can tell a better story. Like I don't want to lose things that were really good because we were racing to meet a deadline instead of thinking, oh, in a year it will be better. So think about how, being in it for a while and really understanding, did this thing really in a month do that? Or is that part of a bigger story that we want to tell? Um, but yeah, for me, the big one is figure out what you believe and how you would say it if I just saw you in the bar or in the pub and it's oh so what happened, Rafa? Oh, this like that should be everyone should have that in their minds and then you're working backwards and like to build that up instead of going oh we've got a really good chance in in the health category for short-term effects because no one enters that. Like, okay, like, fine. I just find that a bit, that's not that inspiring.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And in terms of that, what do you believe and inspiring? I just thought as well about the quick question, the main important question for
Do
me,
you know,
which is
do you know
about
there's one other thing I'd say on it as well,
yes,
and I think about that diversity, like the sort of having people around the case who might not see, like who maybe aren't trained the way we were trained and or don't have all the like Effie's like know-how. On that grand Effie that we won for road safety, I had at one point someone who had a suggestion about how to prove the return on investment. And they came from like the finance department. It was not about the kind of classic return on, the things that we know, like, return on media investment or return on advertising spend or the sort of like more classic ROI that we do for the FEs, which is important. But they came at it like, oh, there's a way to, basically model a little bit what the New South Wales, the people who live here in New South Wales in Australia, what the taxpayer saved because of that campaign leading to less crashes and deaths on the road. And I thought that was really interesting because you can't go, oh, we ran this campaign and like made money. It's not about that. It was about saving lives. So of course you want to show that correlation and try and prove the causation. But what was really interesting was when they said, oh, we could maybe prove that, having spent, you know, $1 or $2 million, we saved 1 or 200 million dollars for New South Wales taxpayers. And that modeling was really something. And I think that was what tipped it over to become a grand Effie in the end, was no one had seen that before. It was it was something that the government could then even say, look what we did, right? Like it was a way to encapsulate the effect. And I wouldn't have thought it. And I've written hundreds of FE's paper. I wouldn't, it just did not occur to do it that way unless I asked someone who comes from a more sort of financial background. So, I don't know. It proves the point. Somebody else came to that with, oh, what you could do is this. And what might happen sometimes in those moments is someone goes, well, that's not how you do FEs, or that's not how we do it. And the judges won't like that. Or you go, hey, that's the best way to do it. And we're going to tell the judges why that's the best way to do it and then see what we get and win, lose or draw. The work was the work. So that's why I was saying before about we worried about what we believed, not what we could win. I think we won it because we believed it, so strongly.
and the results, saving people's lives, saving the budget of the government on taxes as well to rebuild it again onto,
Mm.
I don't know, the emergencies to go there if people have problems. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But the belief is one thing that has, as you've mentioned, helped on that you could have on a pub and thinking about the problem that you have. First of all, define the right problem that the client wants to solve. But I keep thinking about the triple bottom line, as you know. So thinking about people, planet, and of course, profit. So let's
Mm.
think about this one is very much connected. The one that you have won the FEI on the Grand FE is
Mm.
about people, of course, the government and the budgets and the taxes. But on this, the triple bottom line, the people, planet, and profit. How do you
Yeah.
see that the planners can work on that as well? Like having the diversity, equity, and inclusion not only on the company but in each ad, because the execution, for example, is still very stereotyped and getting better, but there's a lot of stereotypes in terms of the ads and the execution.
Yeah.
We should get better, but anyway, just to make it shorter, how to make better triple bottom line, the planners, how can they do that, thinking about the brands
Yeah.
they're working with?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things in this. I think we've learned a big lesson that the triple bottom line and thinking about impact and thinking about communities, and that is not that is not sort of solved by the marketing department necessarily. And it's sort of a I think the big lesson we've learned is it shouldn't be like it's not I think it's arrogant to go, here's the ad, and the marketing team is somehow now experts in these areas. Like it's a very, I think that's why there's a lot of backlash on that now. I think that's why purpose advertising is, I don't think it's that popular. And I think now the world we're moving into, there's going to be a lot of, pushing brands are going to be worried about that stuff, about saying those things and talking about, you know, being good for the planet or progressive or whatever. I think the sort of cultural, the macro level is everyone is worried about being too woke and all these sorts of things. But again, that's because we put it in this weird little box of like, oh, it's somehow all solved through communications. Like when? I've never been an organizational design expert. Like, it's really arrogant of me to go, um, you know, um, all of sustainability and all of the diversity and equity conversation, and it's all somehow contained in a creative idea. I can't believe that. And I think what we've learned the hard way is, again, as a strategist, your opportunity is to go, you could think about a whole of business idea. I think what is good is when we have brand platforms and brand beliefs and behaviors that actually could work at a bigger organizational level. But that's just step one. Step two then is, well, then bring the experts around that. Don't then go, okay, guys, the marketing department thinks we should, this is how we're going to, recruit for this, or design products that way, or we're going to, participate in Black History Month. Meanwhile, there is no one of color on that committee. Like that's crazy. Like that just doesn't make any sense. So for me, it's interesting to think about whole of business and whole of brand ideas, yes, but only if you can then bring, and you do bring deliberately, all the people around the table from all the departments, from all of the operational sides of the business. And we're talking to, everyone that never even has been in, that doesn't have anything to do with the marketing department or with the creative agency. I think you've got to have that. You've got to have that around the table. I think that's the only way back. I think all of the things that we had for a few years, purpose-driven advertising and all that stuff, I think that's finished in its current form, and I think that's a good thing because it was kind of arrogant, and it was also it exposed a bit the reality, which is organizations, businesses do a lot of things to help people, to help the planet, to create sort of more diverse programs, or to, reduce their footprints or whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff, right? These are all levers we should be able to pull, not just somehow think we have to contain all these things in a film. That's I I'm always fascinated by, you know, the maybe I think we leave some things on the table there. I think we go, well, here's our idea. And it's like, yeah, but like, what about all these other initiatives that are already existing in the organization? How might you shine a light on that? Or how might your idea work to elevate the thing that they're already doing? Or to reframe in people's minds what that thing really is? Versus going an ad, we believe, blah, blah, blah. And then people go and look on the website and it goes, oh, well, you're not even, the site doesn't even look the same as the thing you said. So these are the things that I go, have that, take that perspective in the round. Yeah, I don't I think that is why now no one really wants to talk about purpose driven advertising, and probably as I say, that's probably a good thing. But what we should be doing is going is talking to our clients, understanding the things that they are already doing and how we might frame that or reframe that, the importance of that in people's minds. And then maybe saying with this idea, with this platform, how might that inform new initiatives or things that you might do, but put it in the hands of the people who are there doing it. Like let them have it, not, oh, the agency thinks it's like this. Um, for me, that would be the way I would short circuit that and start again.
Great to listen to you, my friend. And I think making a synthesis of that from my perspective is what a friend that was interviewed over here, but I can't remember his name. He has said that it's not about uh, walk the talk, because that would mean you talk and after that you do something. It's about talk the walk. It's first
Yeah,
you
yeah,
and then you talk. So there's a lot
yeah.
of different brands and companies that do a lot of things, but they don't tell. And are the opposite of that, the greenwashing, that we should, of course, every brand shouldn't do it. Because of that, you're thinking about the purpose and communicating without actually making it internally or externally in terms of propagating good benefits from the brand and the company for our society and environmental. And also, there is a new way of calling those things on greenwashing, that is woke washing. Just because
Yeah,
the a pronouncement was there telling you woke, so the woke,
yeah,
that you, just because you believe you are doing, saying that you are doing something, but not necessarily. From my point of view, I believe that the first of all, we could start, every brand can start from diverse tech and inclusion on the execution of the ads, not necessarily changing all the communication of it, but at least having, because on my time at Meta, we had this investigation and presentations and workshops that I was doing, that less than 1% of the ads around the globe has people with disabilities, less than 1% have people LGBTQ plus. 86% of the ads that have that of people who see the ads with LGBTQ plus, they don't feel represented, because eventually when it has, they are not being feel represented, because it's just another stereotype. And a lot of stereotypes over there, like women not driving cars, it's different now, it has changed luckily, but there are a lot of other stereotypes still on advertising. So I think that point could be the point of start from my perspective, of course, but it's connected to what you were saying. And I believe on the branding in terms of the brand benefit and values, at least that. Let's think about the benefits and values of the brand, because then if you're not connected with the purpose, but at least that, what the benefits our product and brand can bring to you.
yeah. I think we're gonna have an interesting challenge now, like what you just talked about, for example, casting like maybe people with disabilities, right? So we have an initiative here in Australia called Shift 20, which is, you know, basically trying to illuminate that, 20% of people live with a disability. Why do we not show that in, in our communications and things like that? And I think there are very simple things like that, which are, you can just do it, right? Which is, let's just have that showcase, in the work that we do. I think the challenge we're going to have, marketers are going to have now, is they're going to be worried about people saying, "Oh, you're going woke because there was someone in a wheelchair in that spot." And to those people, I say, shut the fuck up. Like, that is not woke to show your these are our friends and our neighbors, and look around you. Like, I go, just get on with it. I think where brands go, look at this, thing that we did. It's like, yeah, yeah, now you just want the credit for it, versus going, let's just do it and not worry about somebody said, "Oh, there was a gay couple in that spot. They must be woke." It's like, no, no, we're just showing our consumer, we're showing our audience, or there was a reason, there was a really good reason for that. Um, I go, that's a battle that's coming, or it's here already, and I think strategy people need to be in that conversation, because we are the voice of the consumer, and you need to be there with your clients and with your team internally as well, going, how can we do this in the right way? So that's sort of that, that my sort of view on that bit. I think the the other piece about um woke washing and things like that. I think, yeah, like I think consumers are smarter and more willing to have the conversation than we sometimes we forget that. I think as creative people and creative agencies, you want perfection, right? You want the outcome of what you did to be perfect because you don't have a chance to keep reiterating, like to keep fixing it when it's gone live. That piece of work is out in the world, so we want it to be perfect. My view on that is progress is better than perfection. It's okay to have the conversation and say, this is what we are doing. We're doing well on this, we're not doing so well on that. I think people appreciate that more. When I worked on Volvo, right? Like they do amazing things, but in moving to fully electric, they have some criticism about the batteries. And okay, let's have that conversation. It's never going to be, here it is, guys, we nailed it, and we all live happily ever after. I think we say, well, let's show progress. Progress is better than perfection. Okay, here's the new range. We're moving electric. Yes, the batteries, that is the next conversation. That's the next thing we're gonna, try and address and fix and think about how those, that doesn't create another problem somewhere else. Um, I think you can be honest. I think you can show progress and people will go, cool, as opposed to trying to show perfection and be shiny, and everyone goes, that's woke washing or that's greenwashing or it's a bit disingenuous. It's a brand talking and not walking. For me, progress over perfection. You can do it, and we cannot be afraid to put things in the world that aren't fully done with the bow tied around it. I think our audiences get it and can have that conversation with brands and with us and in social and the places they want to be part of it and just and give them the credit, that they can do it.
My friend, that quote, progress over perfection, will be on my post on LinkedIn about this conversation. And this is real because it was amazing. And I feel that is a fantastic way of thinking about how can we, not only as a brand, as a company, as a planet, evolve. And then coming back to the planning, the brand and the planning live, we can make that progress over perfection. And we can, I believe, convince our clients, persuade our clients to do that as well on these areas of positive social environmental impact. But first of all, profit, because that's what they are thinking about, and so are we. Thanks a lot for your time. I would be here still for another 20 hours, eventually go up in Australia with you, because I missed it a lot 7 years ago, I believe. We were on pubs in London. But
Yeah,
it's good
exactly.
to talk to you, my friend. Thanks a lot for having the time to participate on this podcast. And let's book another call in the future, not for a podcast, but to talk more about this progress, not perfection.
Would love it. Thank you, Rafa. It's been a pleasure. Love talking to you. And yeah, and next time you come here to Australia, we'll do it in person.
Fingers crossed. I hope so.
All right, my friend. Take care.